Now, protesters did take over downtown Ottawa even as the temperature dropped down below -20. Despite a larger police presence on the streets, more protesters and trucks flooded into the city yesterday. Police in Ottawa estimating more than 7,000 people took part. Well, for more on the protests happening on Parliament Hill right now, we're joined by Michael Kempa. He is an associate professor of criminology at the University of Ottawa. Michael, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Listen, I want to begin with your impressions of what's going on right now in the nation's capital. Who has this protest drawn together, in your opinion?
Well, we have several layers of protesters altogether. The biggest group, the angry people we see in the streets, honking horns and so forth, these are people who are upset about vaccine mandates and what they see generally as government overreach. It is a sort of a disorganized group of people. They have some different objectives. But underneath it all, driving it, the organizers raising money, they're not particularly concerned with vaccine mandates. And we know this because they have been planning trucker convoys since before COVID-19. They are interested in pushing a political agenda, raising and organizing supporters, and raising money and resources to further that agenda.
You speak of that agenda, and it's interesting when you look at what's happening there. Amongst the different signs and flags being flown, there are a number of American flags being waved at these protests. We've seen a few Donald Trump flags as well. What does that say to you about the kind of agenda being pursued here?
Well, all of these different flags, although they're different camps of people, it adds up to being counter-state, counter-mainstream politics. There are people who are interested in undoing the conventional state system and replacing the Canadian democratic model with something that is much more grassroots authoritarian and far-right conservative. Now, they have differences of philosophy and opinion, but generally they are outside and intent on dismantling the political mainstream. They're not interested in the charter liberal system that we have here in Canada.
Now, the Ottawa Police Chief admitted yesterday that the force is overwhelmed, that they made a miscalculation. They did not think the protesters would stay as long as they have. So now that we're into the second weekend here, do you think protesters will soon leave, or have they actually been emboldened to stay?
I believe they've been seriously emboldened to stay. When they were coming, I knew what it's all about, so I've seen this before elsewhere in the world. But for Canadians, it's hard for us to imagine that there are about 1 million people in our country who consider themselves to be outside of the political mainstream, just completely counter our state system. It doesn't exist as a conceptual possibility for us. We imagine that's an American thing or maybe elsewhere in the world, but not us. So as it was approaching us, we could see it, but we didn't recognize it for what it was. It was just outside of our realm of experience. Now that we've had an up-close look at it for 7 or 8 or 9 days now in Ottawa, we recognize it and we're adjusting quickly. So Toronto was ready, Quebec City was ready, and Ottawa's catching up, but it's going to be a long haul to get people out who are embedded deeply into the downtown core.
Embedded, as you say, and I want to read a tweet here that you sent out on your account, and this is what you said. The civil response to the crisis in Ottawa is no longer adequate. A request for military intervention must now be made. The Ottawa police are overpowered and citizens are not able to go about their daily essentials. And you go on to address all 3 levels of government, the Mayor, Jim Watson, Premier Doug Ford of Ontario, the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. Do you really think military intervention is the way out of this now? Are you worried about the possible casualties related to that kind of response to this?
Right. So when we say military intervention, we're talking about military aid to civil power. I'm not talking about calling a military strike, a military assault, urban assault into the downtown core. It's a situation where military manpower can assist the police in carrying out ordinary enforcement. And a big part of that is actually providing the machinery to enable the removal of trucks and other vehicles from the downtown core. It's military aid to civil power, not an urban assault that I'm talking about.
Are you at all disappointed that we've not heard more from the federal government on this?
I am, in the sense that Canadians deserve answers, and they look to government for leadership always in times of crisis. the advice that I would give would be that the Prime Minister should demand of the organizers a detailed list of their demands, put them in writing. And the reason that I'm asking for that is I can bet you that the organizers will put forward a grouping of demands that has nothing to do with what most people on the ground protesting are looking for. In other words, it will show people that driving this movement are a set of ideas that are not what they think they're protesting for in the streets.
Now, you referenced the fact that the police in Ottawa were unprepared for what happened here, and other police forces in Quebec City and Toronto quickly learned from these lessons. But seeing what has now happened, what are the policing lessons going forward? As you said, this is not the first time that this type of convoy has been attempted to be organized in this country. So what kind of lessons need to come out of this experience going forward?
We need to be very clear on what the difference is between freedom of expression and assembly, in other words, the right to protest, and where does an illegal occupation begin. So the first thing will be we cannot allow large machines to congregate in number in the central business districts of the big cities of our country. Very simply, the police have the tools in place to control the flow of traffic and prevent big machines from bedding in. People should be allowed to circulate and express their ideas. Of course, they should, even if it's a little bit illegal. We don't have the permits. We tolerate it in a democracy. We do not tolerate the occupation of physical space, preventing citizens from going about their business for days and days until our political demands are met. That's not the expression of ideas. That's extortion at that point. So I think police will be a little bit clearer moving forward on what we allow and what we crack down on early.
Michael Kempa, very interesting to be having this conversation. Thank you for this. Appreciate the time.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.